For 2,000 years, one name has meant betrayal: Judas Iscariot, the disciple who handed Jesus over for 30 pieces of silver, the man whose name became synonymous with treachery in every language on earth. But in 1978, a leather-bound codex was found in a cave in Egypt. It had been hidden for 16 centuries. Inside was a gospel, written in the name of Judas himself. And in that gospel, Judas does not betray Jesus. He obeys him. The Codex Chacos, named for the antiquities dealer who eventually obtained it, was discovered near the Egyptian village of Beni Massa sometime in the 1970s. The exact date and circumstances remain disputed. What is not disputed is what happened next. The manuscript spent decades in the wrong hands. It was stored incorrectly, sold multiple times, locked in a bank vault in New York for 16 years, where humidity and temperature fluctuations caused it to deteriorate into thousands of fragments. When it finally reached a team of conservators and scholars in 2001, they spent years painstakingly reassembling and translating it. The text was written in Coptic, an Egyptian language that became the vehicle for early Christian writing, and dated, through carbon testing, to approximately 280 CE. But the theology inside it was much older. We know this because Irenaeus of Lyon, writing around 180 CE, complained about a gospel used by a Gnostic sect called the Cainites. He described it with contempt, a gospel that celebrated Judas as the greatest of the apostles, the only one who truly understood Jesus. He was describing what we now call the Gospel of Judas. Someone had kept it hidden for nearly 2,000 years. The Gospel of Judas opens with a scene the canonical Gospels never show: Jesus laughing at his disciples. The 12 are praying over bread and giving thanks, performing a Eucharist. And Jesus laughs. They ask him why. He tells them, "I am not laughing at you. You are not doing this because of your own will, but because it is through this that your God will be praised." Your God, not our God, their God. This single phrase reveals the entire theological framework of the Gospel of Judas, a framework the Church Fathers found so threatening they buried it. The Gospel of Judas is a Gnostic text. In Gnostic theology, the God of the Hebrew Bible, the creator of the physical world, is not the supreme divine being. He is a lesser deity, a craftsman god called the Demiurge, who created a flawed material universe and humanity within it. The true God exists beyond this creation, pure spirit, unknowable. Jesus, in this framework, did not come to redeem humanity through sacrifice to the Creator God. He came to free the divine spark trapped inside human beings, to point the way out of the material world and back to the true God. And Judas in this gospel is the only disciple who understands this. Jesus takes Judas aside. He tells him, "You will exceed all of them, for you will sacrifice the man that clothes me." The man that clothes me, meaning the physical body, the shell that contains the divine spark. Judas does not betray Jesus for money or out of weakness. He releases him. He does what Jesus asked him to do. Understanding why this gospel was suppressed requires understanding what the early church was doing in the 2nd through 4th centuries, defining itself. The church that emerged as dominant, what we now call Orthodox Christianity, needed a specific story. Jesus died as a sacrificial offering for human sin. That death was necessary. That death was the point. If Judas was acting on Jesus' own instructions, if the betrayal was not a betrayal at all but the final act of the plan, then the entire theology of sacrificial atonement becomes complicated. Judas becomes not a villain, but an instrument, a necessary piece. That story was dangerous, More dangerous still was the Gnostic framework itself. If the God of the Old Testament was a lesser deity, if the physical world was a prison rather than a gift, then the authority of a church rooted in that Old Testament, claiming to speak for that Creator God, became illegitimate. The Gnostic Gospels did not just offer a different story about Jesus, they offered a different story about who held spiritual authority, and it was not Rome. So they were destroyed. Systematically. Irenaeus wrote a 5-volume refutation. Other church fathers followed. At the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE, the canon was formalized, and anything outside it became heresy. The Gospel of Judas was not lost. It was hidden by people who believed it contained truth worth preserving at great risk. The National Geographic Society funded the restoration and first translation of the Gospel of Judas, publishing it in 2006 to global attention. The initial translation suggested a relatively straightforward reading. Judas was the hero acting on Jesus' secret instructions, but the story was not over. In 2008, scholar April DeConnick published a counter-translation that complicated everything. She argued that certain key phrases had been mistranslated, that the original Coptic described Judas not as a hero, but as a demon, a 13th spirit doing the will of the lower god. The debate continues. Scholars still disagree, and that disagreement is itself revealing. The text is ambiguous enough, deliberately or otherwise, that two credentialed scholars looking at the same ancient words can reach opposite conclusions about whether Judas is saint or demon. The Gospel of Judas was written by people who understood that meaning is not fixed, that the same story can contain multitudes, that the villain of one theology is the hero of another. What do we do with Judas now? If the Gospel of Judas is even partially authentic, if it reflects traditions about Jesus that existed before orthodoxy suppressed them, then one of the most famous betrayals in human history may have been something else entirely. Not a betrayal, a fulfillment. Not weakness, obedience. The church built its authority on the story of Judas as the ultimate traitor, the lesson that those who betray the community will be condemned for eternity. His name became a curse, his image became a warning, but hidden in a cave in Egypt, written on papyrus that crumbled to fragments and had to be pieced back together like a broken mirror, was another version. One where Judas was the only one who truly listened. We may never know which version is true. We may never be able to know. But the fact that someone 16 centuries ago chose to hide this text rather than burn it, chose to seal it in leather and leave it in the dark rather than let it die, tells us something. They believed it mattered. They believed the truth could survive. And it did. Next, the Dead Sea Scrolls. What they found